When David Beckham called Harry and Meghan clowns, he didn't whisper it. He said it where it would hurt the most. Imagine the scene. A private conversation, casually relayed but deliberately seeded, suddenly reverberating through every elite corner of Hollywood and London. The quote was explosive, not because of who said it, but because of what it meant. David Beckham, international icon, respected global ambassador, and once one of the Sussexes' last remaining celebrity allies, allegedly dropped the one word Harry and Meghan could least afford to be associated with: clowns. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let that sink in. Not rebels, not outcasts, not even misunderstood victims of an ancient institution. No, clowns. Think about that for a second. How did we get here? How did two people who once stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, cheered by crowds, who dominated Time magazine covers and podcast charts, end up being mocked in whispered A-list conversations, while their biggest rivals, William and Kate, literally waltzed into a German state banquet as the image of calm, composed, regal diplomacy? What changed? And why now? Because this isn't just about an offhand remark. It's not even just about David Beckham. This is about perception, power, and timing. And something seismic is unfolding right beneath the surface of polished PR statements and curated Instagram posts. The royal family may not be releasing formal letters, but their alliances and their enemies are speaking volumes. This story doesn't start with a press release. It starts with a fracture, a private one, between two power couples who once shared holidays, dreams, and status, until the illusion cracked. You see, David and Victoria Beckham were once positioned as the Sussexes' closest celebrity confidants. There were whispers that David might even be Archie's godfather. Meghan reportedly saw Victoria as a stylistic role model. Harry, once lauded for bringing modernity into the monarchy, admired Beckham's unique ability to bridge sport, business, and diplomacy. There were dinner parties, exchanged gifts, and even alleged business collaborations brewing quietly behind the scenes. But then came the leaks, and everything changed. When Harry and Meghan accused the Beckhams, privately, of being behind damaging tabloid stories, the Beckhams were blindsided. David, a man known for his restraint and loyalty, was reportedly furious. And Victoria? Well, insiders say she never forgave Meghan. But what truly rattled the Sussexes wasn't the fallout itself. It was the swiftness with which the Beckhams detached and the subtle force with which they aligned themselves elsewhere. With William, with Kate, with the side of royalty that still retained global respect. And that's where this story takes a darker turn. Because this wasn't just about losing friends. It was about the Sussexes finally realizing what many in royal circles had whispered all along. Hollywood doesn't care about titles. It cares about status. And in the game of perception, William and Kate had just scored a perfect PR victory on the world stage, while Harry and Meghan were left floundering in the wake of their crumbling brand. Let's talk about that banquet. Berlin, a glittering state event, cameras flashing, world leaders applauding, and at the center of it all, Prince William and Princess Kate. Calm, elegant, unshakable. They weren't just representing Britain, they were redefining it. Their presence wasn't just political. It was symbolic. It was dominant. Now contrast that with what was happening back in Montecito. Meghan Markle was scrambling to revive a brand that had just lost its biggest sponsor. Spotify gone. Netflix tightening the leash. Archetypes, Season 2 nowhere in sight. Her lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, was teetering between mockery and indifference. And Harry? His Invictus initiative was being overshadowed by new royal duties he was no longer invited to. But the Beckham quote, that was the knife twist. Because when someone like David Beckham, so respected, so unproblematic, so widely adored, goes off script and calls you a clown, even behind closed doors, you know something deeper has shifted. And it did. The floodgates opened. Quietly, subtly, elegantly. William and Kate's allies in diplomacy, fashion, and media began to draw the lines. Journalists who once hesitated to critique Meghan's ambition suddenly found the green light. Former Hollywood friends stopped responding. Invitations dried up. Designers who once begged for Meghan's approval now turned to Kate, eager for her understated influence. And what did the Sussexes do in response? They panicked. They tried to spin. They tried to leak. Meghan allegedly called emergency meetings with her PR team. Harry reportedly snapped at aides and advisors. There were rumors of shouting matches, late-night strategy calls, and desperate rebrand ideas. But none of it landed, because the story had already slipped out of their control. Because perception is power, and perception had shifted. Suddenly, William and Kate weren't just the boring royals. They were the stable ones, the trusted ones, the real deal. And Meghan? She was once again portrayed as what she feared most, an actress playing queen without a crown. And here's the emotional crux. Harry and Meghan didn't just lose the Beckhams. They lost the symbol of what they thought they had become. Loved, admired, respected. Instead, they found themselves caricatured, ridiculed, and, perhaps worst of all, ignored. The British press had mocked them before. The royal institution had cast them out. But now, their last lifeline, the celebrity elite, was pulling away. And when that happens, the fallout isn't loud. It's quiet. It's cool. It's devastating. So now we ask, was this all inevitable? Was it pride? Was it betrayal? Or was it a masterclass in long-term royal strategy from the House of Windsor? And perhaps more chillingly, who else is waiting in the shadows to speak up next? Because we've already heard whispers. George Clooney. Oprah's changed tone. The Archewell staff exodus. A-list friends who no longer name-drop the Sussexes. Celebrities who once fought to sit beside them, now brushing past them on carpets. All of this is happening while William and Kate rise. Not just through royal events, but through optics, elegance, and something Meghan once claimed as her own, global branding. But what's most damning is the emotional undercurrent. The feeling that for the first time, Harry and Meghan aren't just being criticized, they're being laughed at. And in this world of legacy, honor, and prestige, that's a scar that doesn't heal easily. So as we pull back the curtain on what really happened, on how David Beckham's alleged insult became a turning point, ask yourself this. What happens when the royal rebels become the royal jesters? And more importantly, who benefits from their downfall? Because if you think this is just about a celebrity feud or a diplomatic dinner, think again. This is about power, about image, about legacy, and the quiet war that's still raging between two very different versions of royalty. And as you're about to see, the most ruthless moves are the ones you never see coming. What kind of friend calls you a clown and doesn't even bother to deny it? That's the question that sent shockwaves from Montecito to London. Because when the alleged Beckham comment surfaced, Harry and Meghan weren't just embarrassed. They were exposed. And the sting wasn't in the word itself. It was in the truth behind it. But here's the twist that most people don't know. David Beckham didn't wake up one morning and decide to drag the Sussexes. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't petty. This wasn't even personal at first. This was the final chapter of a friendship that died a long, painful, messy death. So let's rewind. Because the road to the clown moment starts years before the Germany banquet, years before Netflix deals, years before Meghan's princess era collapsed. It began when Harry and Meghan still believed they were untouchable. And the Beckhams? They were supposed to be their shield. It's almost surreal to think about how close the two couples once were. If you go back far enough, the Sussexes and the Beckhams were practically intertwined. Shared appearances, shared advisors, shared admiration. Harry looked up to Beckham, not for the fame, but for the loyalty. Beckham looked up to Harry, not for the title, but for the authenticity. Meghan admired Victoria's fashion empire. Victoria admired Meghan's potential global reach. They weren't just acquaintances. They were shaping into a power quartet. So what went wrong? Everything. Because the moment Meghan married into the royal family, a silent shift began. With power came paranoia. And with paranoia came accusations. Whispers that would burn the bridge beyond repair. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever had a friend accuse you of something so outrageous, so insulting, so unexpected that you realized, instantly, the friendship was over? That's exactly what happened. Sources say Meghan and Harry privately accused the Beckhams of leaking stories to the press. Not suggested, not questioned, accused. And not subtly, not gently, not diplomatically. A confrontation allegedly took place. A phone call that David Beckham took personally, deeply, emotionally. Because to a man like Beckham, whose entire brand rests on integrity, being accused of leaking is the ultimate slap in the face. He was furious. Victoria was livid. And their reaction wasn't theatrical. It wasn't explosive. It was cold, controlled, final. They stepped back, quietly, deliberately. No more dinners. No more calls. No more photos. No more support. And Meghan? She didn't expect the Beckhams to walk away. Because in her world, power flowed one way, toward her. But here's the contradiction that makes this story so captivating. The Beckhams were more powerful than the Sussexes in every room that mattered. Hollywood, fashion, sports diplomacy, global branding. They didn't need the Sussexes. The Sussexes needed them. And once that switch flipped, David Beckham started talking. Not publicly, not in interviews, but privately, among the elite circles Meghan and Harry desperately want to stay in. And that's where the now infamous clown's comment was born. But make no mistake, he didn't say it like a petty jab. He said it with exhaustion, disbelief, like someone who'd finally admitted what everyone else was too polite to acknowledge. That couple, they're clowns. Because everywhere he looked, the Sussexes were creating chaos. One week it was the Oprah interview. The next it was attacking the monarchy. Then it was Netflix dramas. Then it was Spotify execs calling them grifters. Then Harry's memoir detonating every remaining family bridge. Then Meghan's podcast imploding. Then their Hollywood invitations drying up. Drama. After drama. After drama. And you know what Hollywood hates more than anything? Unpredictable chaos. That's when the narrative shifted. And Beckham's words, those quiet, private, devastating words, spread like wildfire through the elite circles the Sussexes were still trying to cling to. But the most brutal part? Beckham wasn't the only one saying it. He was just the one people listened to. Because when someone with Beckham's stature speaks, people repeat it, and then repeat it again, and then repeat it again, until it becomes the unspoken consensus. Harry and Meghan? They're not victims. They're not revolutionaries. They're not leaders. They're performing, and performing badly. But here's what stung the Sussexes most. At the exact same moment their image was collapsing, William and Kate were rising. Effortlessly, gracefully, and without ever saying a word. Because that's the part Meghan never understood. Silence can be louder than speeches. And Kate Middleton? She has mastered silence better than anyone in royal history. But before we can talk about Kate's rise, we need to understand the moment Meghan realized she had lost the Beckhams for good. Because Beckham's clown's comment wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. And it involved Victoria Beckham doing something Meghan never expected. Something subtle. Something strategic. Something that hit closer to home than any headline ever could. And when Meghan found out, insiders say she flipped. Because this one move from Victoria wasn't just a gesture. It was a message. A clear, sharp, unmistakable message. That the Beckhams had officially chosen a side. And it wasn't hers. So what did Victoria Beckham do? She picked up her phone. But not to call Meghan. Not to repair the friendship. Not to scold her PR team. No. Victoria Beckham allegedly sent a message directly to Kensington Palace. Yes, that Kensington Palace. The home of Prince William and Princess Catherine. And that single, subtle gesture sent Meghan Markle into what one former Hollywood associate described as panic mode meltdown. Because here's the cruel irony. While Meghan had spent the last few years trying to tear down the institution, airing its secrets, publishing its traumas, redefining herself as a royal outsider, Victoria had just quietly re-entered the palace circle. Not through ceremony, not through scandal, through respect. And Meghan? She was no longer just on the outside. She was locked out entirely. But let's break down why this moment was so devastating. Not just symbolically, strategically. Victoria Beckham is more than a fashion icon or ex-Spice Girl. She's a global brand, a tastemaker, a social diplomat. Her proximity has clout, real, profitable clout. For Meghan, aligning with Victoria early on was a strategic power play. She needed to be seen as part of the chic elite. That's why she wore Victoria's designs. Why she praised her in interviews. Why she allegedly courted her approval during the royal transition. But when she and Harry accused the Beckhams of leaking tabloid stories, that bridge was burned. Now, for Victoria to send a message to Kate, whether it was congratulatory, supportive, or just subtly affiliative, it told the entire elite world one thing. We stand with them, not her. And here's what made it worse. This wasn't an Instagram post. This wasn't a public red carpet gesture. This was private, intentional, deliberate, and yet somehow, Meghan still found out. Some say it was through a mutual contact. Others say it came from one of her few remaining allies in the fashion world who had direct knowledge of the exchange. But however it got to her, it cut deep. Because for Meghan, this wasn't just about losing a friend. It was about losing the narrative. You see, Meghan has always understood the power of storytelling. She built her brand on it, through Suits, through Oprah, through Spotify, through archetypes. She believed she could control the plot. But this wasn't her story anymore. This was the elite world writing her out in real time. Let's take a breath here and ask the obvious question. Why would the Beckhams take such a public risk? Why not stay neutral? Here's the thing. They tried to stay neutral. For years, David and Victoria gave the Sussexes the benefit of the doubt. They avoided press traps. They refused to comment. They dodged invitations to gossip. They kept the doors open. But the accusations? That was the line. And once it was crossed, there was no going back. Because in their world, where discretion is currency and loyalty is reputation, being accused of betrayal without proof is a death sentence for any relationship. So when Victoria signaled support for Kate, that wasn't betrayal. That was protection. She was protecting her brand, her integrity, her family's social credibility. And the world noticed. Fashion houses noticed. Hollywood producers noticed. Diplomatic hosts noticed. And Meghan? She panicked. There are reports, unconfirmed, of course, that she called her PR team within minutes of hearing about the Victoria-Kate communication. She wanted damage control. She wanted the Beckham rumor squashed. She wanted something, anything, to make her seem still relevant, still respected, still in the game. But the problem was, no one was playing anymore. Because you can spin headlines. You can buy coverage. You can launch a new jam jar or Instagram post or yoga tea towel line. But you can't manufacture respect. And respect was bleeding from Montecito faster than Meghan could plug the leaks. Meanwhile, in London, William and Kate were quietly preparing for their German State Banquet appearance. They didn't need to address Meghan. They didn't need to reply to Beckham headlines. Because the visuals alone would speak louder than any statement. Grace, regality, stability, class. And Harry? Oh, Harry, caught in the middle of a war that he started, but could no longer control. Insiders say he was furious about the Beckham fallout, that he didn't want to believe it at first, that he tried calling David to patch things up, only to be met with silence. Worse, he was allegedly told through intermediaries that David no longer had interest in rebuilding anything. That must have stung, because say what you want about Harry, he believed these were his people, his refuge from palace coldness, his safety net from family rejection. But now, even that circle had collapsed. And Meghan? She was watching the collapse unfold from the inside, watching her brand disintegrate, watching her allies defect, watching Kate, get crowned by the world she thought she could conquer. And it all started with one word. Clowns. But here's the part no one talks about. The Sussexes weren't just losing the Beckhams. They were about to lose something even bigger. And it had nothing to do with royalty. Because while Meghan was focused on palace optics, lifestyle brands, and social justice narratives, the real power shift was already underway. A shift that would impact everything, from their Netflix standing to their future in American celebrity culture. Because you know who else was watching all of this unfold? Hollywood. And the next move, one nobody saw coming, would take this from royal gossip to full-on brand annihilation. Because if you thought being called a clown by David Beckham was humiliating, wait until you hear who started quietly blacklisting the Sussexes next. It was 5 words. 5 quiet, razor-sharp words. And once Victoria Beckham sent them, the game changed forever. Because in the world of royal diplomacy and celebrity warfare, not all attacks are loud. Some arrive dressed in silk, sealed with discretion, and aimed with surgical precision. And Meghan Markle never saw this one coming. She thought the Beckhams would simply fade away. She assumed they'd retreat from the chaos. She believed that if they weren't with her, they were irrelevant. She miscalculated. Because what Victoria did next wasn't just a message. It was a warning shot. And it was delivered straight to the palace gates. Here's what insiders are now whispering. Shortly after David Beckham's infamous clowns comment began making the rounds in elite circles, Victoria, equally furious but far more strategic, allegedly sent a private note to Kensington Palace. Not an email, not a text, a physical, handwritten message. Why? Because handwriting leaves an impression. It feels personal, intimate, symbolic. And Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. According to two separate sources from within adjacent fashion circles, the message was delivered quietly through a mutual connection, someone with long-standing ties to the royal household. The contents? Just 5 words. She made her choice. Completely. That was it. No signature flourish. No page-long explanation. No dramatic call-out. Just those 5 words. Delivered with perfect elegance. Received with perfect clarity. She made her choice. Completely. Let that sink in. To the outside world, that may sound vague. But in royal and aristocratic circles, that's a statement of finality. It's the kind of phrase that signals the bridge has not only been burned, it's been flooded, raised, and rewritten out of the social map. In Kensington Palace, they understood it instantly. Because here's what made that note so devastating. It didn't need to say Meghan's name. Everyone already knew who she was. Let's talk about what that phrase really meant. She made her choice didn't just refer to Meghan's siding against the royal family. It pointed to the entire strategy Meghan had embraced since 2020. The interviews, the Netflix series, the podcast, the memoir, the subtle digs, the not-so-subtle digs, the lawsuits, the alleged bullying of staff, the open weaponization of emotional trauma for personal brand growth. All of it. Victoria was drawing a line, a silent but powerful line between the world she belonged to and the one Meghan had tried to infiltrate, reshape, and ultimately alienate. And that last word? Completely. That was the dagger. Because in that single word, Victoria wasn't just closing the door on friendship. She was closing the door on forgiveness. So what did Kensington Palace do with the note? That's the part that's still shrouded in mystery. But here's what we do know. Just days after that message was reportedly delivered, a series of coordinated and incredibly well-timed events began unfolding around William and Kate's public image. And they weren't subtle. New high-gloss press photos of Kate surfaced. William began making increasingly solo diplomatic appearances. Kate was invited to meet with German dignitaries, without the king present. And most importantly, Victoria Beckham's fashion house quietly began designing a new capsule collection featuring elements closely associated with Kate's personal style, muted tones, tailored silhouettes, and subtle nods to Commonwealth fashion influences. Coincidence? Hardly. This was power aligning itself with power. And Meghan? She was left watching from a distance, stewing in the irony. Because here was Victoria, who Meghan had once courted as a mentor, who she tried to fashion herself after, who she publicly praised, now aligning directly with the very woman Meghan viewed as her ultimate rival, Kate Middleton. And it wasn't just about fashion. It was about influence. Because when someone like Victoria Beckham chooses sides in a quiet war like this, she's not just making a statement. She's shaping the narrative. Now here's where it gets even more twisted. Insiders say Meghan knew Victoria had sent a message, but not what it said, which led to days, possibly weeks, of paranoia. What did she write? Was it personal? Was it gossipy? Was it formal? And then came the final straw. A tabloid journalist in the UK, known for deep connections in the fashion world, published a cryptic column titled Closed Doors and Open Eyes. In it, the writer referenced a powerful woman of style sending a message across the sea to a future queen, and made direct nods to the phrase, choices made completely. Meghan reportedly lost it, because that column confirmed what she feared most. The message had landed, and it was echoing, not just in the palace, but in the press, in public, in elite social circles, everywhere. And no amount of PR scrambling could undo the damage. Pause here and think. Why would Victoria take such a bold risk? Why escalate when silence had already worked? Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about legacy. Victoria Beckham has spent decades rebuilding her public image, from a pop star caricature to a respected designer, philanthropist, mother, and diplomatic spouse. Aligning with someone so publicly unpredictable, unstable, and increasingly toxic as Meghan? That wasn't just bad optics. It was brand suicide. So she chose. And she didn't hesitate. But what made this move even more cunning? Victoria never said a word publicly. No interviews. No social media digs. No press releases. just silence. And one devastatingly precise, five-word message that would reshape royal headlines for weeks. But here's the twist. Victoria wasn't the only one sending messages. Because back in Montecito, Meghan had her own idea of how to strike back. And it didn't involve diplomacy. It involved Kate. And an all-out symbolic war over fashion, image, and global perception. Meghan Markle has always understood the language of image. Every outfit, every public appearance, every camera-ready smile. It's all curated, calculated, constructed. So when she heard whispers of Victoria Beckham's silent note to Kate and the resulting media ripple, she didn't respond with words. She responded with optics. Because if Victoria wanted to make Kate the symbol of royal elegance, Meghan was going to fight back the only way she knew how, with a counter-image. And so began what some insiders now call the wardrobe war. It started subtly. Meghan stepped out in Los Angeles the very next day, wearing a sharply tailored beige coat, eerily reminiscent of one of Kate's iconic looks from her 2019 Irish tour. Fashion bloggers noticed immediately. Side-by-side comparison shots went viral within hours. Coincidence? Come on. Then came the carefully staged pap shots. Meghan walking solo, coffee cup in hand, fresh blowout, minimalist outfit, no visible jewelry. Giving royal on-the-move energy, as one Vanity Fair columnist described it. Then came the Instagram teases. New flowers on the table, new branding on a blurred envelope, hints of a relaunch. And finally, the kicker, a soft launch for American Riviera Orchard, her long-rumored lifestyle brand, with a logo design that featured handwritten script, unmistakably similar in tone to Victoria Beckham's own branding aesthetic. Subtle? Yes. Intentional? Every pixel of it. But here's where Meghan's strategy misfired. She thought she was mirroring power, but what she actually did was expose her desperation. Because while Kate was gliding through Germany on the arm of a future king, draped in diamonds, hosted by heads of state, and earning praise from world press, Meghan was posting carefully cropped photos of jam jars and garden benches. The contrast was brutal, and the public noticed. The comments turned. The headlines shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Kate versus Meghan. It was about class versus clout, substance versus spin. And Victoria's message? It had done its job, because it made Meghan react. And in reacting, Meghan looked rattled. But let's talk about why this cut so deeply. For Meghan, the betrayal wasn't just social. It was existential. She had built her entire post-royal narrative around the idea that she was redefining modern royalty. A disruptor, an innovator, a modern Diana. And in some ways, she had the momentum. The Oprah interview, the Netflix boom, the Spotify deals, the magazine covers. But now, her pillars were collapsing. Spotify dumped her. Netflix was rumored to be scaling back its Sussex investments. Archewell was hemorrhaging staff. Public sentiment was cooling. And just as this was happening, Victoria Beckham, one of the last remaining A-list bridges, walked away. Worse, she walked toward Kate. To Meghan, that wasn't just rejection. It was replacement. And it reignited the one narrative Meghan had worked hardest to kill, that she had always wanted to be Kate. Because the truth is, that ghost still haunts her. Remember the early days? When Meghan joined the family, she was compared to Kate constantly. The way she dressed, the way she stood, the way she waved, the way she smiled. And behind closed doors? According to staffers later quoted in Tom Bower's book and Valentine Lowe's Palace exposés, Meghan was furious about the constant comparisons. She didn't want to be the next Kate. She wanted to surpass her. She wanted to be the bigger star. But the problem is, you can't compete with someone who's not playing your game. Kate never chased celebrity. She never sold a brand. She never launched a podcast or spilled secrets. And because of that, she became trusted. While Meghan, she became profitable, then expendable, and now replaceable. And so, when Victoria's five-word message reached the palace and echoed through the headlines, it did more than just sever a friendship. It triggered a response Meghan wasn't prepared for, because it made the public ask a dangerous question. Wait a minute, maybe Meghan was the problem. And that's a narrative she cannot afford. Because once that perception takes root, it spreads. It infiltrates media deals. It influences guest lists. It affects brand collaborations. It changes how the public sees everything, from fashion to philanthropy. And if Meghan thought she could reverse it with a few good outfits or a press blitz, she was wrong, because the wave had already shifted. And now, even Meghan's most loyal supporters were beginning to ask, where's the substance? Where's the vision? Where's the follow-through? She had the microphone. She had the audience. But where was the impact? Where was the dignity? Where was the royalty? And just when things couldn't seem more fragile, another leak emerged. A new insider. A fresh scoop. A report that sent Meghan into full panic mode. Because someone, from inside the Montecito circle, allegedly confirmed that the Beckhams had explicitly rejected an invitation to a Sussex-hosted charity gala in LA. Flat out. No reschedule. No explanation. Just a no. And that story? It didn't break in a British tabloid. It broke in Variety. Which meant one thing. Hollywood was listening now. Not just the palace. Not just fashionistas. Everyone. And that story ended with a chilling line. The Sussexes once moved in rarefied circles. Now, those circles seemed to be quietly closing. But what came next? No one saw it coming. Because back in London, William and Kate were about to make their grandest appearance yet. And Meghan? She would be watching from 5,437 miles away. On a screen. Surrounded by silence. And what she saw next would push her beyond the brink. The lighting was perfect. The gown shimmered like frost. The cameras didn't just capture Kate Middleton that night, they canonized her. And Meghan Markle? She was watching the whole thing. On a tablet. From a Montecito estate that suddenly felt 1,000 miles too far from relevance. Because what happened at the German State Banquet wasn't just a royal appearance. It was a coronation of perception. A global, glamorous, unmistakable message that the monarchy wasn't just alive, it was thriving. Without her. And worse, it was Kate standing at the center of it all. Let's set the scene. October 2025, Berlin. A formal state banquet hosted by the German president in honor of Prince William and Princess Catherine's official tour. One of the most highly anticipated diplomatic events since King Charles's health scare. The stakes were sky high. Tensions with Europe were delicate. Post-Brexit sentiment still raw. The crown needed to project grace, unity, and cultural relevance on an international stage. So what did Kate do? She stunned. Wearing an ethereal, floor-length icy blue Jenny Beckham gown, complete with subtle crystal beading and the iconic Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, a piece famously worn by Princess Diana. Kate emerged from the royal car like a scene from a modern-day fairy tale. Cameras erupted. Crowds gasped. Journalists scrambled to describe what could only be called flawless execution. But here's where it hit hardest. Every single headline that followed didn't just call her elegant. They called her regal. Queen in waiting. Catherine the Steady. Modern royal powerhouse. Words Meghan had once tried to own through media interviews and podcast monologues were now being gifted to Kate by global outlets, without her asking. And Meghan? She couldn't stop watching. According to multiple entertainment sources, Meghan had been fully briefed about the banquet's PR potential days in advance. Her team monitored royal appearances obsessively. They knew when Kate was scheduled to walk into that hall. They knew the press list, the dress code, the photographers. They knew everything. And Meghan had made it clear, I want to see it. So as the event unfolded, Meghan, surrounded by a small circle of advisors and PR handlers, watched the live stream on her iPad Pro, seated in her curated Montecito kitchen, barely touching her lavender tea. Every new image from the banquet, every flash, every camera angle, was dissected in real time. And with each moment, Meghan's silence grew heavier. Because Kate wasn't just beautiful. She was controlled, composed, comfortable, effortless. Not a single misstep. Not a single awkward glance. Every smile measured. Every gesture deliberate. Every visual curated without trying to be curated. And that, right there, was the difference. Kate didn't look like she was performing royalty. She was royalty. While Meghan, she looked like someone watching royalty. But let's go deeper. Why did this moment hit Meghan harder than any other? Because in Meghan's mind, Germany wasn't supposed to be Kate's big night. It was supposed to be hers. Insiders now claim that Meghan had been quietly preparing a counter-strategy for months. A rebrand, a product launch, a new visual identity built around empowered living. Her team had planned a subtle media rollout to coincide with October's news cycle, aiming to flood lifestyle channels with Meghan-centric content. New photos, new recipes, new wellness narratives. And then the palace announced the German state visit. And suddenly, the spotlight wasn't just diverted. It was snatched. Because no matter how many floral candles Meghan launched, no matter how many filters she added to her home-baked brand teasers, nothing could compete with the sheer gravitas of Kate walking into a historic European banquet in full royal regalia. Nothing. And Meghan knew it. Here's where the emotional spiral began. Sources close to Meghan say she was visibly shaken watching the footage. She reportedly paused the live stream multiple times, rewinding Kate's entrance, analyzing facial expressions, whispering sharp comments under her breath. One witness described her expression as a mix of awe, rage, and disbelief. Another said she stood up at one point, murmured, "She looks exactly like I imagined I would," and then left the room. Let that line land for a moment. She looks exactly like I imagined I would. Because that's the root of it all, isn't it? Meghan never wanted to replace Kate. She wanted to surpass her. And now she was being reminded, publicly, globally, mercilessly, that the crown would never be hers. That no matter how many Netflix deals or Oprah interviews or personal essays she published, she was now the other Duchess, the one who left, the one who wasn't invited, the one who had to watch. And while Meghan unraveled in Montecito, the royal machine kept moving. William stood beside Kate in a tailored tuxedo, nodding diplomatically, making remarks in fluent German, charming dignitaries, representing the future of the crown. Kate gave a short speech, in German. That's right. Fluent, confident, unrehearsed. The audience applauded. Twice. The German chancellor leaned in afterward and whispered something that made Kate smile. The cameras caught it. And once again, the headlines wrote themselves. Kate, the diplomatic weapon. From English rose to global icon. Fluent. Fashionable. Formidable. And Meghan? Meghan had her own headline that week. Meghan Markle's jam jars sell out in boutique launch. Which do you think played better on the world stage? Which one do you think the Beckhams forwarded around their dinner table that night? Now here's where the pressure inside Montecito exploded. Because Meghan's entire strategy, her public persona, her brand arc, was built on the assumption that she could outshine the royals by outperforming them. But Kate wasn't performing. She was simply being. And the world finally saw the difference. But the worst moment? It wasn't the tiara. It wasn't the gown. It wasn't even the applause. It was a single photo. A now viral image taken by an AP photographer halfway through the banquet. Kate sitting tall, tiara glowing, hands folded softly, head turned slightly, a faint Mona Lisa smile, eyes calm, focused, serene. One image. No caption needed. And Meghan? She saw it on Instagram. It had already hit 4 million likes in less than 12 hours. No controversy. No chaos. No campaigns. Just presence. Back in Montecito, that's when things escalated. According to reports from inside the Sussex household, a crisis PR meeting was called that night. Emails flew. Strategy decks were reviewed. Panic whispers filled the hallway. Because if Kate's banquet appearance had become the story, then what was Meghan's? And worse, was anyone still watching? So what did Meghan do next? She went into damage control mode. Not publicly, not with a statement or interview. She's too seasoned for that. But quietly, frantically, behind the scenes, her team began drafting what one insider called a brand urgency memo. The goal? To pivot attention, to create a counter-narrative, to distract from that banquet and that image. Ideas were floated. Could Meghan surprise drop a new podcast teaser? Could she publish a heartfelt essay in The Cut or Vogue? Could she be photographed visiting a charity in LA? None of it stuck. None of it felt powerful enough to compete. Because here's the hard truth. When the world sees royalty in motion, real royalty, every influencer's curated brand suddenly looks small. And that's exactly what Meghan was feeling now. For the first time in years, she wasn't just out of the spotlight. She was out of moves. Meanwhile, the media was feasting. The banquet photos flooded every major outlet from Berlin to New York. German news anchors praised Kate's speech as masterful diplomacy. British tabloids, usually rabid for scandal, stood still in awe. Even U.S. outlets, long accused of being sympathetic to Meghan, leaned into the Kate narrative. And then, like clockwork, the late-night monologues kicked in. One American talk show host joked, "Meghan's out there launching jam jars, and Kate just launched a diplomatic masterclass. The audience laughed, but Meghan didn't. Because that line captured everything she feared. That she was no longer being taken seriously. That the Hollywood she fought so hard to re-enter was now treating her like a punchline. That while she was planting lavender in her backyard, Kate was planting flags in Europe. And Harry? Sources say he was distant, withdrawn, watching the coverage in silence, scrolling news feeds in bed, jaw clenched. One source claimed Meghan snapped at him when he showed her another viral photo of Kate. "Why do you keep showing me her?" It was raw. It was honest. It was the first crack in a facade they had worked so hard to preserve. Let's not forget, this wasn't supposed to happen. Meghan and Harry were banking on 2025 being their comeback year. New brand, new media strategy, new lifestyle vision. But Kate's banquet entrance in Germany had wiped the chessboard clean. And now, they were scrambling. Because perception is a cruel beast. It doesn't change slowly. It flips. One day you're a trailblazer. The next, you're an outsider. A performer. A clown, if you ask certain ex-friends. And once that narrative flips, it's nearly impossible to reverse. So what did Kate do that was so different? She didn't react. She didn't gloat. She didn't wink at the cameras. She didn't leak anything. She simply showed up, did the job, and left every room with more admiration than she entered with. That's real royalty. And Meghan, despite all her ambition, couldn't replicate it. Because royalty isn't about titles. It's about trust. And Kate had quietly earned the trust of the very world Meghan had spent years trying to outshine. But here's the most devastating part. Even Meghan's own circles were shifting. A-list names who used to invite her to premieres suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Fashion brands that used to fight to dress her were now sending looks to Kate. PR managers who once pitched Meghan as a must-have guest were now silent. It was subtle, but it was undeniable. And Meghan, the actress who once mastered every scene, was now playing to an empty theater. And then came the final blow. A headline in the Times. Just 9 words. Germany applauds future queen. Catherine wins the world. No mention of King Charles. No mention of William. Just Kate. The star. The center. The woman Meghan had once whispered was too boring to matter. Now she mattered more than anyone. Back in Montecito, the silence stretched. Staffers didn't know what to say. Meghan reportedly stopped checking the livestream replay. She stopped responding to emails for 24 hours. And for the first time since her royal exit, she questioned whether she still had an audience. Because Kate hadn't said a word, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't changed anything. She simply did what royals do. She showed up, she shined, and she let the world decide who they trusted. So Meghan, desperate for a pivot, gave her team a chilling directive. We need to reframe the story. Now. But what came next wasn't reframing. It wasn't strategy. It was reaction. And it pushed Meghan toward her most reckless media play since the Oprah interview. Because someone suggested something bold, something theatrical, something guaranteed to bring attention back her way. And Meghan said yes. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Because someone inside Montecito leaked the plan. And the result? Was a PR nightmare even Meghan couldn't spin. It wasn't just the tiara. It wasn't just the gown. And it wasn't even the applause. It was who was sitting around William and Kate at that banquet. And who wasn't. That told the real story. Because while the world focused on Catherine's sparkling entrance, Meghan Markle missed the deadliest detail of all. She'd been replaced in more ways than one. You see, in the world of monarchy, power isn't always loud. It's not about speeches or headlines. It's about presence, proximity, position. And during that glittering night in Berlin, the real power wasn't just sitting at the head table. It was scattered throughout the room. Aristocrats, diplomats, foreign royals, billionaire philanthropists, fashion titans, silent figures with influence far deeper than Instagram followers or Netflix views. They weren't clapping for drama. They were investing in continuity. And they made one thing very clear that night. The future is with William and Kate. Not Harry, not Meghan. Let's unpack this. At a royal banquet, table seating is everything. Who sits next to whom? Who's placed within camera view? Whose shoulders are visible behind the future queen's silhouette? That's choreographed warfare in royal terms. And in Berlin, the choreography was brutal. To Kate's left, the German president's spouse, positioned not just out of protocol, but out of respect. To her right, Lady Sarah Chatto, a discreet but deeply respected cousin of the late Queen Elizabeth, a woman who rarely travels for public events, but made this banquet a priority. And down the same side of the table, Lord Frederick Windsor. Yes, the very same Lord Freddie who once attended private charity galas alongside Meghan and Harry, but now, sources say, won't return their calls. Further down, Countess Mountbatten of Burma, a woman with deep royal ties and decades of loyalty to the crown. Every one of them, present, poised, silent, loyal, and every one of them has, at one point, distanced themselves from the Sussexes. Now here's where it gets chilling. Insiders say this wasn't just a coincidence. The palace orchestrated this seating plan with a quiet vengeance. Because they knew the cameras would pan. They knew the photos would spread. They knew the message would be subtle, but devastating. These are the people who matter. And you're not in this room. But it wasn't just royals at the table. The event's guest list included international diplomats, military figures, and select fashion leaders. One name stood out in particular. Natalie Massenet. Yes, the founder of Net-a-Porter. One of the most powerful women in global fashion. A woman once rumored to be considering a partnership with Meghan for a Duchess of Sussex fashion capsule. That deal? It never happened. Now she was sitting 2 seats behind Kate, laughing, engaging, nodding graciously during the royal toast. Another ally. Another message. Meanwhile, back in Montecito, Meghan was reportedly stunned to see the guest list. One aide said she turned pale when she saw Lady Sarah Chatto's name. Why? Because Sarah had once defended Meghan privately. Back in 2018, during Meghan's rocky royal integration, Lady Sarah was allegedly one of the few extended royals who offered her counsel, gently encouraging her to move slowly, listen more than speak. Meghan didn't listen. She dismissed the advice, brushed her off as irrelevant. And now, that same woman was clinking glasses with Kate on the world stage. That's not just optics. That's karma. Let's pause and reflect. Why do these silent allies matter? Because this is the real monarchy. Not the press. Not the headlines. Not even the king. It's the network of loyalists. The people who've stayed silent for decades. The ones who don't sell stories. Who don't chase fame. They observe. They remember. And when the time comes, they choose sides. And they've chosen. Because while Meghan screamed for justice through podcast microphones and Netflix deals, Kate listened, waited, and was crowned by them. Not with a literal crown. With something far more valuable. Trust. But let's dig even deeper. This wasn't just about social alliances. It was about strategic insulation. You see, the palace learned from Megxit. They knew the danger of outsiders infiltrating royal proximity. So in the past 12 months, there's been a quiet purge. New advisors were brought in. Old friends of William and Kate reappeared. Fewer Hollywood names. More discreet, experienced courtiers. People like Hugo Vickers. Like the Duchess of Gloucester. Like Lady Louise Windsor. Now quietly stepping into more public duties, positioning herself as the anti-Meghan Gen Z royal. And guess what? These are not the kind of people who leak. They're the kind who understand the long game. And right now, their loyalty is laser-focused. Not on Harry. Not on the drama. Not on Sussex sob stories. But on protecting the future queen. And here's the kicker. The people around Kate now, they're not performers. They're enforcers. Which makes her untouchable. Because when your circle is ironclad, no gossip can take root. And Meghan? Her inner circle has become a sieve. PR leaks. Anonymous sources. Suspicious resignations. Rumors of NDAs being updated monthly. It's chaos. And chaos is contagious. So as the Berlin banquet photos circled the globe, one image stood out above all. Not Kate's gown. Not William's speech. But a candid shot taken just after dessert. Kate, standing and smiling with a group of older, previously low-profile royals. Men and women barely known to the public, but deeply entrenched in the system. They looked calm, secure, satisfied. The caption? Surrounded by strength. And Meghan? Once again, she was watching. According to sources, she threw her phone across the table after seeing the image. It hit the floor. Shattered. No one moved to pick it up. Because what could they say? There was no spin to apply. That photo made one thing abundantly clear. Kate was now fully backed. Not just by the monarchy, but by the infrastructure of royalty. The invisible scaffolding Meghan had underestimated, now rising around her rival like a fortress. And this fortress had no door for her. So what did Meghan do? She turned to Harry, desperate, and demanded he make a call to his brother, not to reconcile, but to confront. Because in Meghan's mind, this wasn't just royal theater. This was war. And the next move wouldn't be silent, wouldn't be subtle. It would be a phone call between estranged brothers. And what was said on that call left Harry shaken. It wasn't the applause itself that broke Meghan. It was who it was for, and what it symbolized. Because when the entire German state banquet rose in a 2-minute standing ovation, not for the king, not for William, but for Kate, the sound didn't just fill the hall. It echoed across oceans, across headlines, across Montecito. And when that echo hit Meghan's carefully curated mansion, she finally realized the terrifying truth. She wasn't being talked about anymore. Let's back up. The banquet was already a strategic win. The optics had been flawless. Kate had stunned. William had impressed. The guest list was a chessboard of silent power. But no one predicted what happened just before dessert was served. The host stood. A simple toast. A few words about partnership, diplomacy, and the embodiment of grace under scrutiny. Then he turned to Kate and said, in clear, deliberate English, "Princess Catherine, you are not only a guest tonight. You are a symbol of dignity, of balance, of the very best your nation offers the world." The room paused, and then they stood. Not all at once, not in a frenzy, but in a wave. Rows of guests rising, forks placed down, napkins adjusted, eyes on Kate. Applause. Long, steady, earned. William glanced at her, startled, proud, a little emotional. Kate stood, smiled softly, nodded graciously. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She simply received it. Because royalty doesn't ask for reverence. It commands it. Now back in California, something else was rising. Tension. Meghan was watching live coverage through diplomatic channels. Yes, those same connections she still had from her brief days as a working royal. One of her aides had managed to secure a delayed live stream. She was watching with 2 advisors, a brand manager, and, briefly, Harry. She didn't expect the ovation. None of them did. But when it happened, the room went silent. And stayed that way. Because applause is just sound. Until it's a signal. And this wasn't just any signal. It was global approval. No Instagram. No filters. No spin. Just pure human respect. One of Meghan's advisors, trying to lighten the mood, reportedly whispered, "That was tasteful." Meghan didn't respond. Then she whispered something no one expected. "That should have been me." The air froze. Because in that sentence, there was more than bitterness. There was longing. A wound reopening. You see, Meghan didn't just leave the royal family for freedom. She left because she thought she could outgrow it. That she could become something bigger. More loved. More modern. More relatable. But now, a German dignitary had just defined Kate as the very ideal Meghan believed she represented. And the world had agreed. So what did Meghan do? She left the room. Not dramatically. Not in a tantrum. Quietly. But according to one source, as soon as the door closed, they heard her voice rise from down the hall. Not words. Just sharp, angry noise. The kind that comes not from rage, but from realization. And Harry? He didn't follow her. He stayed in the room. Watched the rest of the stream. One of the aides asked if he was okay. He reportedly shrugged and muttered. "They always clap for her. They never did for us." That sentence tells you everything. It's the pain of knowing you were once cheered, but now you're not. Because applause isn't just a sound. It's a mirror. And for Harry, the reflection hurt. Let's talk about why this moment mattered. Not just emotionally. Strategically. Because applause isn't just about recognition. It creates momentum. And for William and Kate, this moment cemented something the Sussexes had fought for and lost. The crown of public opinion. Remember, Meghan and Harry dominated headlines for years. They had explosive interviews, documentaries, podcast charts, magazine covers, but all of it was driven by conflict. Now Kate was winning with grace. No controversy, no digs, no memoirs, just presence, silence, service. And the applause in Berlin confirmed the shift. Loudly. Here's the twist. The ovation was never in the official program. The palace hadn't asked for it. The German hosts hadn't planned it. It was organic. which makes it deadlier in PR terms. Because organic applause tells you what people actually think. No spin, no scripting, just admiration, raw and real. And once that clip went viral, Meghan's worst fear was confirmed. People weren't just choosing Kate. They were forgetting Meghan entirely. The clip was shared over 17 million times in 72 hours. Global hashtags exploded. Hashtag Queen Kate. Hashtag Grace Under Crown. Hashtag Royal Elegance. Hashtag Standing for Kate. Even Hollywood insiders chimed in. Kate Blanchett retweeted it. Hugh Jackman reposted it. Reese Witherspoon shared it on her story with a heart emoji. All people Meghan had once tried to bring into her own circle, all now orbiting Kate. Back in Montecito, the mood turned desperate. Meghan reportedly demanded an emergency video call with her PR team. The goal? Comeback strategy. Fast. Ideas were pitched. A new charity drop. A children's book announcement. A surprise Lilibet cameo. A magazine profile centered on resilience. None of them felt big enough. Because the ovation had become the story. And any reaction now would seem petty, performative, jealous, which is exactly what the palace hoped for. To make Kate's win untouchable. To make Meghan's response look small. Here's the deeper sting. Meghan always believed her strength was in the message, the cause, the voice, the platform. But Kate had just dismantled that belief with no words at all. She didn't need a cause. She was the cause. She didn't need a message. She was the message. And the people who stood for her, they weren't clapping because they were told to. They were clapping because they saw something Meghan had lost in the storm. Royalty without drama. And the palace? They knew exactly what they'd just achieved. By the next morning, internal emails between senior courtiers reportedly celebrated the press coverage. One line stood out. This may be the first time Catherine has publicly surpassed her late majesty. Think about that. Not just admired. Surpassed. And that shift wasn't lost on Charles. Nor on Anne. Nor on Camilla. Each of them, seasoned, wary, politically sharp, now understood the power Kate wielded. And what was coming next would shake the very foundation of everything Meghan thought she had built. Because someone had just leaked new details from inside Montecito. And what they revealed would turn that 2-minute applause into a full-blown royal firestorm. So what did Victoria Beckham do? She picked up her phone, but not to call Meghan, not to repair the friendship, not to scold her PR team. No, Victoria Beckham allegedly sent a message directly to Kensington Palace. Yes, that Kensington Palace, the home of Prince William and Princess Catherine. And that single, subtle gesture sent Meghan Markle into what one former Hollywood associate described as panic mode meltdown. Because here's the cruel irony. While Meghan had spent the last few years trying to tear down the institution, airing its secrets, publishing its traumas, redefining herself as a royal outsider, Victoria had just quietly re-entered the palace circle. Not through ceremony, not through scandal, through respect. And Meghan? She was no longer just on the outside. She was locked out entirely. But let's break down why this moment was so devastating. Not just symbolically, strategically. Victoria Beckham is more than a fashion icon or ex-Spice Girl. She's a global brand, a tastemaker, a social diplomat. Her proximity has clout, real, profitable clout. For Meghan, aligning with Victoria early on was a strategic power play. She needed to be seen as part of the chic elite. That's why she wore Victoria's designs. Why she praised her in interviews. Why she allegedly courted her approval during the royal transition. But when she and Harry accused the Beckhams of leaking tabloid stories, that bridge was burned. Now, for Victoria to send a message to Kate, whether it was congratulatory, supportive, or just subtly affiliative, it told the entire elite world one thing. We stand with them, not her. And here's what made it worse. This wasn't an Instagram post. This wasn't a public red carpet gesture. This was private, intentional, deliberate. And yet somehow, Meghan still found out. Some say it was through a mutual contact. Others say it came from one of her few remaining allies in the fashion world who had direct knowledge of the exchange. But however it got to her, it cut deep. Because for Meghan, this wasn't just about losing a friend. It was about losing the narrative. You see, Meghan has always understood the power of storytelling. She built her brand on it. Through Suits, through Oprah, through Spotify, through archetypes. She believed she could control the plot. But this wasn't her story anymore. This was the elite world riding her out in real time. Let's take a breath here and ask the obvious question. Why would the Beckhams take such a public risk? Why not stay neutral? Here's the thing. They tried to stay neutral. For years, David and Victoria gave the Sussexes the benefit of the doubt. They avoided press traps. They refused to comment. They dodged invitations to gossip. They kept the doors open. But the accusations? That was the line. And once it was crossed, there was no going back. Because in their world, where discretion is currency and loyalty is reputation, being accused of betrayal without proof is a death sentence for any relationship. So when Victoria signaled support for Kate, that wasn't betrayal. That was protection. She was protecting her brand, her integrity, her family's social credibility. And the world noticed. Fashion houses noticed. Hollywood producers noticed. Diplomatic hosts noticed. And Meghan? She panicked. There are reports, unconfirmed, of course, that she called her PR team within minutes of hearing about the Victoria-Kate communication. She wanted damage control. She wanted the Beckham rumor squashed. She wanted something, anything, to make her seem still relevant, still respected, still in the game. But the problem was, no one was playing anymore. Because you can spin headlines. You can buy coverage. You can launch a new jam jar or Instagram post or yoga tea towel line. But you can't manufacture respect. And respect was bleeding from Montecito faster than Meghan could plug the leaks. Meanwhile, in London, William and Kate were quietly preparing for their German State Banquet appearance. They didn't need to address Meghan. They didn't need to reply to Beckham headlines. Because the visuals alone would speak louder than any statement. Grace, regality, stability, class. And Harry? Oh, Harry, caught in the middle of a war that he started, but could no longer control. Insiders say he was furious about the Beckham fallout, that he didn't want to believe it at first, that he tried calling David to patch things up, only to be met with silence. Worse, he was allegedly told through intermediaries that David no longer had interest in rebuilding anything. That must have stung, because say what you want about Harry, he believed these were his people, his refuge from palace coldness, his safety net from family rejection. But now, even that circle had collapsed. And Meghan? She was watching the collapse unfold from the inside, watching her brand disintegrate, watching her allies defect, watching Kate, get crowned by the world she thought she could conquer. And it all started with one word: clowns. But here's the part no one talks about. The Sussexes weren't just losing the Beckhams. They were about to lose